The Record of Lodoss War series is a series that's been around for quite some time. Matter of fact, in the mid to late 80s, Lodoss was simply a location in the world of Pharsalia, which was the setting for Sword World RPG, a tabletop RPG. The story that would ultimately serve as the basis of the series was a Dungeons & Dragons replay, a transcript of an RPG session. Those grew to be so popular that the DM or Dungeon Master, a guy called Ryo Mizuno, thought, "Hey, I should write a book about this," and started adapting them into fantasy novels. Mizuno was a part of Group SNE, the folks behind the tabletop RPG. From there, the series went on to spawn several manga series, anime adaptations, drama CDs, and video games, and the game we're looking at today, Record of Lodoss War on the Sega Dreamcast, is one of two games to have been officially released in English, with the other being the MMORPG, and an unofficial English translation for the Super Nintendo game. The game had the subtitle of Advent of Cardus in Japan, and was an action RPG similar to Diablo. In this game, you play as a red-haired warrior brought to life by the great wizard Wart in order to combat the evil forces wanting to resurrect the dark goddess Cardus. The game doesn't actually take place in Lodoss, but on the island of Marmo, also known as the Land of Darkness. As you fight your way through the game, you eventually meet up with characters from the Lodoss series as they also seek to stop the dark goddess from returning. While the game looks to be a Diablo clone, it does have its share of differences, but does that make the game any good? Find out in The Good. The game's most unique aspect is how it handles character progression. While your character does level up, you'll quickly find that his stats don't really increase all that much later on in the game. The charm of this all comes down to how you handle your weapons and armour. Early in the game, you rescue a dwarf who offers to be your blacksmith throughout the game. By defeating enemies and collecting the mithril they drop, combined with learning ancient runes scattered throughout the island, you can power up your weapons and armour as well as give them special effects. By powering up your stats, the mithril demand becomes greater, and to keep up you're given a way to collect more mithril faster later in the game. The game has you going from a man dealing about 5 damage and being afraid of death, to literally dealing damage in the millions while taking very little from most enemies. The game's difficulty also accommodates for this by having enemies constantly surround you as you progress. You'll generally find yourself going back to the blacksmith often to power up your equipment, and as you collect equipment, you can transfer your progress between different weapons and armour, which saves you the hassle of re-enchanting them from scratch, and your bonus stats are then added to the base stats of the new weapon or piece of armour, which doesn't take away from the joy of collecting more powerful weapons and armour as you go through the game. Your character can learn magic to escape back to the main base when in a pinch, though some areas will stop you from doing that. You can also use the magic to attack enemies or defend yourself. I found this was a rather unique take on getting stronger in the game, and I really had fun watching my character grow. The amount of things to do in the game was something I also enjoyed. As you go through the game, you're tasked with collecting medals scattered across Marmo for the Elder of the Village of Dark Elves. By collecting these medals, you are rewarded with items and equipment. The medals are kept in dungeons guarded by fierce enemies who can quickly put an end to your adventure if you go in unprepared, so having lots of healing potions or a strategy comes in handy. Another character will task you with a side quest of collecting pieces of armour as well as a weapon, and like the medals, your journey will also quickly come to an end if you don't prepare right or underestimate the enemy. As I mentioned earlier, the game is good at showing me how powerful I can get, but there's always an enemy or enemies that remind me of the cruel reality and prove that a simple mistake can cost me everything. Now that we have the good out of the way, let's look at what wasn't so good in the bad. Let's address the elephant in the room here. The game does suffer from slowdown, especially with a lot of enemies on screen, and later in the game, you'll be seeing a lot of enemies on screen, especially when they start outnumbering you. Thankfully, by this point you should be able to handle them without too much trouble, but in the last dungeon where you'll be grinding for mithril, not only may you encounter so many enemies that it will slow things down, but if you're not properly prepared, you'll come across enemies that can stun lock you by continuously petrifying you. As you're unable to break free, since you'll be petrified again before you can regain control, you must watch helplessly as the monsters surrounding you slowly punish you for your foolish mistake. Other monsters, particularly larger ones, can also stun lock you to death by continually slamming you with their weapons or fists, hitting you again and again as you're getting up and unable to control your character. Admittedly though, this is what I get for being complacent and failing to adapt to my inventory to handle the situation. One thing which I also found a minor annoyance was the footstep sounds you would make while you were running around. Thankfully, you can pick up boots that made them quieter, but you can also pick up boots which made them louder. I also found some of the rewards a little unsatisfying. I won't go into great details about it, but after beating a couple of certain enemies, with the exception of the large amount of mithril, which I didn't really need as I was strong enough already, I didn't really feel any sense of achievement. One of these enemies require you to fight a gauntlet of enemies before it, and if you lose to them, you gotta start that gauntlet all over again. Other than that, there's not much else to talk about here, so let's get on to the opinion. Record of Lodoss War I thought was alright. I really enjoyed its take on character progression, and I enjoyed the side quests the game had to offer. However, the game does slow down when there's too much going on, and reminds you that preparation is key. You don't need to know the story of Record of Lodoss War to play the game, though having that knowledge will allow you to pick up on things well before they're revealed to you in the story. If you're a fan of Diablo or other action RPGs, then I think this game is certainly worth looking at. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Record of Lodoss War Pan's weird CG face out of 10. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.